Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Sorry it took a few minutes. We had some technical errors on my end. So we're in now. How's everybody? I see some old faces and some new faces. It's all good.
Thanks, Mike.
How you guys doing? All right?
Good.
Congratulations, Michelle. Your daughter landed a school. What, South Carolina?
Georgia. Yeah.
Georgia.
She
Okay.
finally made her decision, so she's excited.
Good deal. It's nice to have choices, right?
It is.
Let me see if I can get an audio face here so you guys can see. I see some new people. Dawn, how are you?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. All right, here we go. We'll give a couple more minutes, about 5 after. Well, we're starting out. Is there anyone out here that has any questions with any contractual items that they're having right now that need to be resolved?
No.
No's good. No problems with contracts with multiple bids, buyers that are fussy, sellers that just don't think you're selling the house for enough money, all that stuff.
That's normal. Yeah.
You gave my house away, it sold in a day.
Yep.
Last time I was on the market for 390 days. Okay, good. So that's all good stuff. Chris, how's your group doing?
We're doing pretty good. We're staying busy. Staying very busy. We're winning some offers. We're losing a couple here and there, but it's the nature of the business right now. So
It is, and that's one of the things for everybody. I mean, especially with the more opportunities, you have a greater chance of putting some deals together. When you have that one tough buyer or two tough buyer, trying to keep them engaged in a frustrated market is a game, because you lose 1, 2, 3 deals, you kind of think like, what am I doing? And you got to go back and try and evaluate your offers, make them as strong as possible. It's one thing to talk about contract. It's the bigger item is getting to a contract. And that's the game right now. So, if that buyer doesn't have a lot of money down, I mean, what can you do? What's going to be attractive? But I can tell you one thing that I've seen happening, which I think is a lost art. And I don't know if a lot of you people, a lot of our associates are using it or not, is call the agent. Call the agent, warm the call up, warm the house up, warm the buyer up, warm the seller up, get a connection. This nonsense of just throwing an email or just throwing a text or throwing a contract over there. There's no warm up. Try and build a relationship that say, you know what, this girl or this gal is, really nice. They called me, let me know the offer's there. Give me a confirmation when you receive it. You throw them a little email back. Thanks for confirming reception. Try and build a relationship up, because if it's not this deal, it's going to be another deal. And they say, you know what, it didn't work out for that buyer, but maybe next time around you could have a better chance at it. So I think it's important to continue to build relationships up, especially with the other co-ops, because they're either going to be really good or a nightmare. And there's a lot of people, they won't call you. I don't know, a lot of, I think the most frustrating part for buyers is agents don't take the time to make sure, if they're showing 3 or 4 or more houses, that everyone's available. Because what's more frustrating than going to a house on a Saturday and the house was sold on Thursday? It's happening, and you can't. And I asked this question to associates when it comes up. I said, "Did you call ahead of time?" And they go, "Why? It's showing it's available on the market." I said, I said, it could be shown available on the market. The contracts could be coming, through attorney review. I mean, wouldn't you rather know before you go spend that client's time and your own to go out and show property, sell it, only to find out that it's already been sold? So, can you knock somebody out of the block? Yeah, you can. I mean, with a better offer, stronger offer, cash buyers, better terms, there's a lot of different scenarios that come into play. But more so is, do the homework, do the extra calls, because at least your clients can't come back to you and say, oh, Mike's showing me these houses. He must not have anything to do on a Saturday because we're looking at houses that have already been sold. And it's frustrating. So put yourself in the buyer's shoes. I would not want to take the time to go out with a realtor and only to find out the houses that are being shown are sold already or have contracts out. Know what you're dealing with. If you knew there's a contract, you tell them up front, say, hey, listen, there's 5 offers on the table. You game? I mean, we can get you involved, but you're gonna, I just want to set the platform that it may not be a good ending, but at least we're throwing, we're throwing a dart at it at that point. So anyway, so that's just some of what I see. Mike Emanuel, you're a new face to me. How are you? Welcome to Keller Williams.
Doing well, thank you.
Good deal.
I joined back in January of last year, but truth be told, I'm actually have been sitting on the sideline because of COVID and being
Okay. Not a problem. Not a problem. Get into the game. The playing field is happening around you with or without you. So we want to get as many people safely into the field.
Right.
In fact, my wife and I took a walk this morning, and we were talking about this very item, is trying to work your business safely. And I think there's many of us that have figured some of it out. We'll never figure all of it out because you still got COVID out there. It's we had an associate that we've lost. I've lost some friends' parents and things like that. So it's the real deal, and working safely is what we're trying to do. And we need some luck. And I think that once we figured it out, then you could do that. But have you considered? Are you involved with any FaceTiming or anything like that for your client flow? Or are you building up your database? What are you using now?
I've just been staying in touch with the current database I've had and trying to expand a little bit, but trying not to expose myself. But I just got my second vaccine in last week, so I'm looking forward to exposing myself a little bit more.
Wait 14 days, then expose yourself.
Right. Right.
That's all. But anyways, good stuff. All right, so let's jump into this. What I like to do is, on an open session is I didn't really specifically pull anything out. However, I wanted to work on, again, once we get a contract, is working out these terms. And that's why I went through some of those frustrated situations in advance, is once you get to a contract, how many of us, Chris, your group's large. There's a couple other people here that are working in some groups. We're waiving home inspections, or for home inspections are for principal purposes only. Does anybody know what that means contractually? Anybody have an idea what the ramifications of that are as a licensed realtor or broker?
Mike, I think it could come back and bite us in the end. If we're not encouraging them to do the appraisals, then it can come back to us at some point.
Right, Anthony, you're right. I've said this a couple of times. It's going to be, how many of us are watching television? You see one of these commercials for asbestos from the 60s. They're going to be talking about this to the year 21. So it's going to be interesting. But one thing about it is it's got to be a conversation, in my opinion. And and I say that loosely. I'm not a licensed attorney. Is hey, there's other people, and the sellers are asking if the if the home inspection is going to be conducted, because typically there's a lot of times I don't, especially in this market, check off home inspection in the offer. Now, if I'm doing a deal down the shore, I put it on there because I know I gotta I gotta put that on there because I'm doing the contract. So a lot of times I don't, because some realtors look at that and say, oh, they're going to do a home inspection and these other 3 aren't going to do a home inspection. Because you don't have it on your offer form doesn't mean you're not going to include it. It's in the contract. There's a 14-day period that's built in unless it's reduced. So if that's the case, that going into the deal, into the transaction. So I think what has to happen is you got to be a little bit savvy on how you negotiate that. Say, you know, this buyer, you got to talk to the buyers and say, listen, it's totally your decision. I personally have never bought a house without a home inspection, but we're in a different environment right now. And a lot of sellers in our marketplace, and you can read it online, you can go on the internet, and thank God, you know, they could Google the hell out of it and find a whole bunch of things about it. Is a lot of buyers are waiving the home inspection, or they're just for principal purposes only, which of course get into structural, you know, you still have the body of the contract, but does everybody understand that our contract, how does everybody look at our contract? What protection does the buyer have or seller have with our current contract of sale? 118.
Attorney
Anybody?
review.
Excuse me?
Attorney review.
Attorney reviews there, correct? So you have a 3-day attorney review. Does that protect us during the home inspection period?
No.
Not at all. So we have an as-is contract. So we already have an as-is contract. However, there's provisions set forth in the contract that actually identify the major components of the contract. So with that being said, there's exits already in place. So the fact that we're doing a home inspection and we get beyond the 3-day attorney review, we have that 14-day period, unless it's lessons. We have 17 days theoretically to do our home inspection. So if somebody waives that, do you think you should be keeping that information? In other words, if they sent you a text or if they sent you an email, say, you know, since Anthony brought it up, say, Anthony, you know, I'm going to take your lead on this. I'm going to waive my home inspection. I hope I get the house. And you're going to say, okay, we'll see what's happening. But is it a good idea to have a home inspection? Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Even if they're waiving it, you know, don't waive it and all of a sudden want to come back and say, I want to revisit it now because now I got all kinds of problems 6 months down the road. I mean, we have one of those in the loop right now. This girl categorically, this buyer, I'll say girl, this buyer, categorically refused a home inspection. I text and I sent an email because it was on a referral agent. I said, I highly recommend you have a home inspection, blah, blah, blah. It protects your interest only when you buy the house. And she refused. Furthermore, she was going to refuse to do the termite inspection because she just said, I'm out of money. I don't want to do anything. I said, well, maybe you shouldn't buy a house. No, my dad's helping me. I'm going to buy the house. And these are discussions you have to take them out of the deal, right? So you figure these are all good discussions. The agent in our company, we actually bought the termite inspection, thankfully, because I said for $65, I'm not going to end up going to High Street and going to court for somebody when we know you need a home termite inspection. Home inspection buyer can waive. So she waived it. And you know what I got last week in the mail? Nice little letter. Retain all your information, your contract of sale, your texts, your telecommunications, your emails, because she wants to sue the previous buyer, actually the seller, and use the previous buyer's home inspection because they didn't give it to her. Even though everybody from 6 Ways to Sunday told her to get a home inspection. But keep in mind, you can call Smuck and Smuck and it's free. There's no tort reform. So if they lose, you know, it's okay. You pay. You don't have to pay, I should say. And
So there's no obligation for the seller to provide a previous inspection, correct?
right.
Okay.
You're right. Which I think what she's going to try and do, she's going to go after the listing agent on the other side. And I knew the attorney, and I said, well, I don't want to say his name. I said, well, let me ask you this. I said, you're calling me. It's a Saturday. I'm answering your call. I said, are we in the party? He goes, no, we're not. I said, when do we become part of the party? Because we have E&O insurance. So it's right. All of a sudden you get that other call. It's like, hey, listen, it's nothing personal, but you know, you guys have insurance, and you know, this poor girl bought this house. Didn't want to listen to any professional advice. So can you imagine, here we say it, they put it in the contract under 43, they waive it. How hard or easy is that going to be for them to go make a phone call on your cell phone for free and call best attorney to sue realtors? And it's a done deal. So we're settled. They're $50,000 to $75,000 transactions on average. So Anthony, you're right to answer your question. Yes,
Mike,
Dawn.
I don't understand. So you're saying I mean, it's in the contract and so you're saying she's gonna win the case? Just because you have insurance. I'm a doctor myself, so I know malpractice insurance. I know how that works, but I mean,
How's it usually work?
it sucks, but I mean,
Okay,
so
we're on
are
the
you
same
saying
page.
even though it's rock solid in the contract, you're gonna say she could still win some money? But what would be the reason? What would they say? That was,
Well, the reason would be that we're licensed professionals and we would know better.
you
Okay,
did
because
know
we're,
better,
and we explained to her in writing that we knew better.
right,
However, she didn't take the advice.
right?
So now she could lawyer up, and now all of a sudden it gets spun off to not just ours yet. We're not in the party yet, but we're coming, because ours is usually, anytime you get one realtor, you usually can double up very easily with two. So then you start lawyering up at $300 to $500 an hour, and they typically don't like to go to jury. They usually like to settle, as your cases do, out of court.
Yeah.
So what happens there my point is, as soon as you enter that arena, you've lost, because it cost you, the $2,500. It's a lose-lose situation. And that's the problem that I think a lot of us are going to have down the road. We're not there right now. It's going to be down the road, because someone's going to say they go in and they took someone's advice. They took a realtor's advice. They didn't do the home inspection at all. And they go in and find a lateral or structural or, horizontal crack somewhere along the foundation, the roof's leaking, there's mold, there's all kinds of situations that come into fruition. And it just makes it it starts to contest the whole contract, because it doesn't become part of what they didn't do, the buyer didn't do. It's part of what you didn't do at that point. So there's a lot of liability at that point. So we're going to have that going forward. I mean, I'm doing one right now, down the beach. I mean, we forego the appraisal. Okay, and that's a lot of that's happening right now. And the buyer is accepting to pay the lesser amount of the sales price if necessary. So what does that mean? That means if we're doing a $2.5 million house and it doesn't appraise for 2.5 and it only appraises at 2.3, buyer's coming up with 200K. Simple math. So I'm waiting for the one to trip into where they get into a multiple bid situation, which anybody that's in production is seeing multiple bid situations. They lose 3 buyers. They take this one buyer because that buyer agreed to forego the inspection. They forego the appraisal. And now all of a sudden it comes in late and said, I don't want the house anymore. So the seller can sue the buyer, right, for breach of contract, for indicating they had enough proceeds, because I know a lot of us aren't digging into making sure that they have an extra $200,000 laying around. It doesn't have to be a multi-million-dollar deal. It could be a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 deal. If they don't have that money, they decide to opt out, and the seller puts their house back on the market and sells for less than contractual price. That buyer that breached his contract or her contract could be liable for the difference. Okay. And that's what people forget about. It's not just the escrow deposit. It's the difference in the sales price. So the seller might not have to be as motivated to go grab another buyer. In this market, it's a little different. Everything's different in this market in 38 years of doing this. So I think that we're all learning. We know it's busy. And I think that it's one of those things that I think that most of us are all going to have to really pay attention to, is saving those notes, put them in your files, make sure they're parked someplace, make sure that if you're doing DocuSign, you're doing .loop still, whatever you're doing, make sure you have copies of those where they can be found. When a buyer sends you that little text or that little email, I'm not going to do the home inspection. I don't want to lose the house. I want to buy the house. So make sure you have that in writing, because it's invaluable, especially going forward. Okay. Any questions regarding any of this that we're talking about? Get on.
Where would you have that in writing, Mike?
It's in 43. You would put it in paragraph 43 of the contract.
No, I mean like the documentation between you and your client about, I'm highly recommending you do this, and she says no. Like, what kind of document is that? You put
Email, text,
something?
email, text, all admissible in court.
Okay.
Everything. Isn't that great?
I got you. Okay, that's fine.
You could even do it on one of these.
Yeah, but I mean, it counts as your documentation. Yeah. Okay.
Just
All right.
have them put it on a Post-it.
Yeah.
It's once it's copied, it can be put into a PDF, and there's your, something that you have. It's already going to be in the contract of sale, but you want to have some kind of authorization indicating to do that. All right, because you're not acting in behalf of as their attorney, you're acting as their realtor, so you're not a licensed attorney. So you have to be. That's where I think it starts to get a little iffy, and that's why, like, if you are getting in these situations, and many of us on this call are, is get an attorney involved. I mean, first of all, if you're in a multiple bid situation, does everybody know the advantages of having attorneys on both sides? What do you guys think about that?
I think now more than ever, it's important to have an attorney represent your client.
You're right about that. It's a buffer. It's really a buffer. And realistically, if you're in a multiple bid situation, in fact, a couple of people in the office, I'm not going to name out, they've had calls from the sellers and said, the sellers called the selling agent to call the buyer's agent, said, oh, my people, they know them personally, tell them the house is theirs, and we're good to go. And the next thing you know, 10 minutes later, well, they're really good friends, but somebody just offered me $15,000 more. You don't mind if I lost my friend for 15 grand. So you have to be prepared for that. If you bring an attorney in and the seller, buyer both have attorneys, you get to waive the 3-day attorney review. So once you get a contract and both attorneys review that same day, there's no attorney review. That solidifies the transaction. So now you can breathe easy, get right into the inspection period where you should be. So think about that when you're working with your buyer consultations to make sure that you're putting that kind of verbiage into their mind. Questions? Good stuff. It's good stuff. All right. So let's go down. Like, does everybody know? I mean, I know that Jim is available. I'm available in most cases. If you get into any of these situations where you need assistance with adding additional language into the addendums, please feel free to call us. We don't have a lot of that language on there for specific reasons. There's a lot of liability with it. Okay, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, we're not telling people how to not do things. We're telling people how to do things. So the contract is set in stone for that. We give provisions for that. One of the things that is necessary too with the inspection period, especially with dealing with some timelines, is, can the home inspection period be modified? Katie, what do you think? Can it be modified, the home inspection period?
Sure, if there is an addendum.
That's correct. And also you can shorten up the time. If you have a quick closing, someone's trying to do something in 5 to 6 weeks, and you got a 3-day attorney review, you're counting days, 14, make it 10, shorten it up a little bit so you get everybody. Now, it's a whole another world to try and get a home inspector right now, because they're not a dime a dozen and they're busy. So you might want to start setting up some preliminary calls and say, hey, listen, just put an offer out. Can you give me a couple of days that I could work with? Don't wait till the 3-day attorney review is over with, because you could always cancel the appointment with the vendor. But make sure you make the calls. Don't wait to the last minute, because you got to be on it. So you can shorten up those time frames. Good question came up the other day is well and septics. Does everybody understand how long contractually a well cert is good for? 180 days. So no one should, if you list a house, okay, and it does have well and septic, that seller's responsible for the well cert. So you should be when you're doing your listing presentation, tell her or him to get prepared for that. So order the well, get it. So if it needs to be, because what's happening is they're going through the stages. They're doing the 3-day attorney review. They're doing the home inspection, negotiate the buyer's letter request, back and forth 5 days. Is there any limitation on how many days you can go back and forth?
No.
Does anybody know it's to the day of closing?
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing in the world. It was never like that. So you're never really on solid ground to the day of closing. So
With what?
I said, when you're negotiating a home inspection,
Okay.
and the buyer and seller are going back and forth negotiating items to be serviced or addressed prior to closing, there's no determination when it has to be done. So the best thing to do is, when you do have a meeting of the minds with the inspections, I'm jumping a little bit all over the place, but when you do have a meeting of the minds, the best thing to do is do an addendum. All this, as per the home inspection, all all items have been negotiated and, this paragraph is deemed closed. So in other words, you want to close up that negotiation period as much as you can if you're able to. But getting back to the well, is that should be ordered by your seller, because even if this buyer doesn't happen, he could give that, or they can give that to the next buyer if that's the case, if something doesn't go right. But more importantly, if you wait to the end and you have this extended time, Michelle, you're in an area that services as well. There's a lot of times you have to chlorinate, you have to do some testing. So now it's got to be sent to a lab, and those tests are what, 48 or 72 hours. So there's a time period that you lose, and that might change the projected sales date, settlement date. Now, if you have 2 or 3 or more people involved, do you think that compromises some families? So who could be culpable for that? So there's another, you know what I'm saying? Just try and work through this whole process with everybody. I think it makes for a smoother transaction and possibly more referrals for you going forward.
Mike,
Okay.
are you seeing in regards to inspections where people aren't waiving them per se, but they're putting a monetary cap? Like, we'll waive inspections up to the first.
I am. And what does that mean?
Right.
Okay.
That's my question. So like, how do you
Question.
quantify that? Because if you get like a list from the home inspector, like there's a leak under the faucet, there's,
Right.
UCFI outlets, like how do you quantify that monetary agreement?
Well, let's just break down the verbiage itself. There's a cap. So let's just say it's 2,500 or 5,000. So if anything comes up under those thresholds, it's deemed negotiable. But if it's underneath, so what if it's the septic system? Okay. You might have put some seller agents put $1,000. Okay. And say, let's just use $5,000 as our cap. So if that's septic repair is more than 5,000, what happens with the transaction? I'll stay with you, Michelle, since you brought the
Right.
question.
So then it would be up to the seller to either repair it or terminate the contract.
That's correct. And or the buyer to say, I don't want to buy the
Right.
house because the septic system's over 5,000. So ultimately it can hurt the seller equally as much as the buyer. Because now there's walking. Say, I'm not buying it. Say there's lateral lines or septic fields that need to be, redug out and set, or needs a new distribution box or such. So if that repairs over $5,000, either party can walk away. That's what I don't think some selling agents really understand. It builds another buyer contingency in there. So they're weighing if the house is good. Question for someone?
I guess I feel like the language in the contract in regards to that needs to be very clear and specific, because say they're waiving up to the first 1,000, is that cumulative or is that per item?
It would be, that would be the number. So anything above that grand would be a walk away. So I think that, because keep in mind, the contract's zero, right? The contract's zero. So anything above that is the new number. So if it's 1,000, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever. But I'm seeing some of them where the seller's not doing anything.
Right, me too.
So they kind of know that. And if that's the case, what should we all be doing in that contract? So if you had a tough negotiation, there was multiple bids, it's already an as-is contract. What else could make that even more solid than that?
On the buyer side?
No, seller side. We're putting an addendum in there. We're selling the house as is. We have multiple deals, multiple bids, and we want to make sure. I mean, what I'm getting at is in our addendums, miscellaneous addendums, there's an addendum for as is.
Yeah.
So put the as is paragraph in there. Okay, that you can't get any clearer than that, So I'm seeing it with, even with the estates, put the as is in, because in most cases the estate is not going to do anything, and at all. They're not, especially in this market. I mean, they're not even going to do contractual items. They're just going to say
I just showed a property. It's not a bank owned, but the seller said we're not providing the well cert. You're gonna have to get that too.
And that's another thing. That's a contractual item. So you got to read, and a lot of realtors, and I'll just say, we want to poo-poo everything. You don't read the remarks and pay attention to the facts. So it could be a disclosure issue in the first couple lines. Buyer is responsible for any and all municipality and certs. What does that mean? So what does that mean to a buyer?
That means more expenses for the buyer. I mean, they have to pay for the CO, they have to pay for the water tests.
And they might even have to buy the equipment.
Right.
So now all of a sudden you're going to get first of all, you got to explore what township it's in. Okay. Make sure if they're doing just a regular fire CO or they're doing a whole house inspection or both. Okay. So now all of a sudden, all of a sudden you're doing a little bit more work, and that buyer might not be on board with all that. But if it's disclosed in the buyer's remarks, okay, they might just have that. They might not have them in the public remarks, but they might be in the broker remarks, so you might see them privately. But most of the time I'm seeing it right in the public remarks. It's better to do it that way, quite frankly, as a seller, because you're disclosing to the public, like, this is what you're signing up for. You're buying as a state, it's an as is, where is, and buyer to do any and all inspections. And would having FHA candidates be a good item for a seller's agent to be looking for? Does everybody know the differences of these items? Mm-hmm. Because when you put that in there, you're attracting that FHA pool. So now you got the 3%ers, okay, with not a lot of reserve money that have to do COs. And what if you have to put, a lot of the townships have all, because townships are getting older and they don't have any money because they have all the pay raises going on. So now you have sidewalks all raising. So now you have sidewalk inspections. So you either have to grade them if it's within tolerance, or you have to have, mud jacking come in, or you got to remove them and replace them. Cherry Hill just went to sidewalk inspections. They never had it for 30 plus years that I can remember. They just started doing sidewalk inspections because all the trees have roots underneath them. So it's one way of getting the tree down. They'll take the tree down, you have to replace the sidewalk. What a deal, right? I'd rather take the tree down. Anyway, so these are items that you really have to pay attention to. These are the details. These are the details that cause lawsuits, and these are the details that kill your deals. So sometimes it's not the deal dying, it's the realtor killing it before it starts. and it happens more often than most people want to own up to, is because the details are all there. It's just whether we're really paying attention to them and reading them. So I would make sure that, if you're showing properties, there's interest, get a seller's disclosure. Why? It tells you as much more about the property than anything else you'll know. I mean, if they're honest. If they're not, it gives you liability. It gives you some leverage to go back to them. Any questions that we have so far?
What was Sarah's first? Oh, she deleted it.
Okay. All right. Let's do a couple other things here.
Oh yeah. So what is that?
I think somebody needs to be muted. Let's see. I know what I want to do. Completion of the contract. With your offers, when you're writing, I don't know if I can manage the
right.
Who's on the phone. Anyway, who's still doing offers to purchase? Just to show of hands. Who's still doing offers purchase? Okay. Versus contracts. Katie, you going right into contract now?
I try to go directly to contract.
Right.
It depends.
Depends on the agent. I usually have been I've been emailing them ahead of time. Have a really interested party. You prefer a contract or an offer to purchase, and most of them.
That's exactly what I do.
Yeah. So that way you're not.
Most of them want proposals because they're getting so many offers. They don't want to read through a whole contract.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It's easier to move around, especially.
How many on Skylar's picture?
Yeah, especially if you have to bring them in front of somebody and show them that. But I think that's a good way of approaching that item. Now, if that's the case, what I'm saying is realtors are not putting their information down. You don't have your office IDs, you don't have the realtor's IDs, and those clean up a contract. Making sure you have those blanks filled is really important down the road when especially if an attorney gets involved with it and they got to finish the contract off for you. They're going to think that this person doesn't know what they're doing. So it kind of makes it a little bit harder for somebody to review in that case. Some of the tipping stones I wanted to go over that are all contractual. And some of the things that I see are missed, and they're highly sought after by the Real Estate Commission. One is this CIS forms on every buyer or seller. Got to have it. It's the first thing they're asking for. CIS form. They want to see what you disclosed, whether you work with buyer, seller, dual. You really, have to have that in your possession. It should be part of the contract. If you're a listing agent, part of the contract, and I don't know if I see them all the time. Brenda usually does that. I called her ahead of time. She said everything seems to be in pretty good shape. If you're listing a contract, do you want to be a dual disclosed agent? Yeah, good. Shaking your head's good. Do you need the paperwork for that?
Yes.
Right, and it's there. It's all part of the contract. But if you look at the real estate fines each month, there's a large percentage of the fines that are put on people that don't have dual disclosure set up ahead of time. In other words, at the point of listing, you have to disclose that. You also put it in the contract. But if you put it in the contract and didn't do it before, that might be the seller's aha moment, like, hey, they never told me they were working with both sides. So now you have a cloud. So getting rid of these clouds is really what you want to work with. And I think just being as much transparent as you can is going to help everybody with this matter, and with these matters of not getting in any deeper water than you need to be in. What's the other thing? Contracts.
Okay, great.
No one has any questions with the contract. How about with the addendums or anything like that? There's a couple
Mike,
things.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
TD Bank and my
So
last name is
regarding putting in offers on a contract. Now, I've been doing this a long time, way before we ever started using contracts for offers.
With a C, thank you.
And my feeling on that is, and I'm kind of curious on your opinion, is you as the buyer's agent fill out this 13-page contract or however many pages it is. You can't answer many of the questions because it states seller says there's no this, seller says there is that. You can't answer those questions. On the bottom of the contract, it states this is a contract. And now you have your buyer sign a contract.
Yes, that's correct.
That's not even a complete contract. It still has blanks on it. So I'm really against submitting offers on contracts or buyer's agents doing the contracts. Your thoughts?
You may be alone. You might not like that answer. You may be alone. The board has been pushing go to contracts for going on 3 years right now. And Pat, I'm going to get, you don't do a lot of work down the beach, right? Down at any of the shorelines. You wouldn't be able to submit that offer to purchase there. It's a form of an agreement of sale. It's coming. It's going to come. And quite honestly, I'm not 100% against what you're saying. I get it from both perspectives. But I know one thing, and I think even when we were doing in person, Michelle can go back. I mean, I've been doing this for a little bit. If there's multiple offers, Pat, and you're on the table with a contract and yours is there, and some of Ketty and Michelle, I just point you both out, and you've heard me say this a couple of times. Typically, agents are lazy, and for quite honestly, to do the contract in its format as it is takes 25 minutes. I'll do your contracts for you.
Oh, and I don't mind doing that. Once they've accepted my offer, I'll say, would you like me to do the contract? And I'll ask them all those questions.
Right.
But, but you're submitting a contract with
That's correct.
Possibly not having all, like I said, all the information.
There's not, I don't know what information more that you would need other than a seller's disclosure, and you could put in a 43-A seller's disclosure, property disclosure to be attached. That's it.
Well, I'm saying like that it says in there, cesspools. Seller states that there are no cesspools to their knowledge on the property.
That's correct. I'm okay with that.
But you're not answering that question. You don't know whether or not the seller is aware or not aware as the buyer's agent.
These properties are listed for sale, correct?
Yes.
Okay, do you know that when a property is listed for sale, your liability as a listing agent is to know that answer?
But I'm the buyer's agent.
Okay, you looked in the you looked at the remarks. You
Sure,
walked the property, correct?
sure,
It either has well or septic or has city, correct?
correct.
What else do you need to know?
Whether or not they are aware that there was ever a cesspool. There could have been a cesspool on that property and they went to public sewer.
Right.
Um,
And let me just ask you, Pat, this is a condo built in 1990. What are the chances of that septic being
I'm
there?
sorry, my phone rang. I just turned it off.
You know, a lot of this has to do with discretionary choices. And obviously it's your choice to run your business as you wish. And I'm okay with that. More successfully, you would be to be in a little bit, I'm going to say possibly a little bit more open-minded about going to contract in certain cases. And if I like that a seller is giving me the opportunity to do my own contract, because I'm going to take every advantage from my buyer. How about that? I don't want any cesspools on the property. So guess what box I'm checking? There are none. Okay. So if there's a provision for a septic, I know there's a septic there. I'm gonna put, like, you know, anything over $500. My people can walk. I'm going to take every possible advantage for my buyer. So I don't understand. I understand what you're saying. You know, don't get me wrong. Don't fly off the handle. But I look at it where if somebody's going to give me the advantage to draw my buyer a contract, I'm okay with that, because I'll get the deal, number one, and I'm going to make the provisions to my buyer's advantage. And if the agent doesn't tell their seller about it, shame on them.
And
Okay.
what I do also is when I send the contract, I ask the seller's agent to review the contract and make sure that if there are any changes they want to make, that they make it and initial it and then send it back to me for initials.
Right. And you could send it to them and give them the ability to edit as well.
Correct.
So, I mean, Pat, I'm with you with this, but I think to have that hard, rigid line, it's going the other way. There's more numbers going right to contract than there is with keeping the offers to purchase in play. It's just what's happening in today's market.
Because we look here.
Okay.
I right now, I think in this market, Mike, with this, you've got buyers and you're submitting offers, you know, maybe 2 a week for some of these buyers that are losing. You know, right now I'm seeing more proposals than contracts. I would say pre-COVID, a lot of people were pushing contracts. But I think now, just because of, like someone said, you know, going through all those contracts, if you've got multiple offers, trying to sort that out with the seller, it gets a little difficult. And then if you're putting in multiple offers for a buyer, you know, to constantly keep doing contract after contract after contract, you know, so.
I hear you. I do. And I certainly understand it from all perspectives. I just think that I think it's just a way that we're going to be seeing this going. So I just want to prepare you for that.
Oh, no, I see it going. I mean, I've been doing this for 28 years and I know that, and I'll probably be one of those people that go out kicking and screaming. But, you know, but I just feel that it's a nice clean contract. If you've done the proposal, everything's worked out, you have a nice clean contract, as opposed to somebody changed this, we get all the initials on, then we need those initials, especially using DocuSign to make sure that, you know, when you've got to manually insert all those initials, make sure you don't miss anything. It just seems like a cleaner way to do it.
You can make it as clean as you want with the technology that we have. Because once you change something, the worst case scenario is that people have to go back and sign again. So I understand it. I mean, and listen, and I wish everyone success with what they're doing. But as many of us can see, it's going that way, and it's just a matter of time. And it's, but I mean, listen, we'll fight them all the way through. I'm with you.
His real estate price.
And listen, you could, you know, getting back to this Post-it, you could write an offer on this. Guess what? The agent has to present it.
Everybody's got, it's so smart. Yeah, think about our generation now. He
So
said,
anyway,
how's your exam? I'm debating.
we got somebody here. Let's see if I can mute them. Okay. All right. Pat, thank you so much for your input on that. And I totally respect what you're saying. Any other questions in regards to some of these add-ons with the addendums and things like that?
Just getting like, yeah.
No? Okay.
I don't want anybody that we know or our age trying to get the real estate license because this is all business for us.
Hear that?
2-3 years from now, everybody's going to be trying to.
See on it, it's Mike Alessi. We could all hear you. There we go. See what happens when everyone's listening? Always be careful, especially with technology. Sometimes your phone might butt dial and you might just want to say what you really think about a buyer or seller or another co-oping agent. One thing that we're learning right now, and let's just finish it up with this, is there was a couple rebuttals going back and forth on the buzz about buyers' love letters to a seller. Everybody understand that? And it's very simple. And I think that a lot of us are going to learn from this because anything that looks like an advantage that someone else doesn't have is going to be scrutinized. So if you got that little dog and that little puppy and the other people don't, you know, it's a bad thing. So if you have a good job because you went to school and you went to law school or medical school, it's okay for you, but it's not okay for me. So this treating fairly stuff is going to be a big play. Now, if a buyer insists on writing one of these letters, and I have my niece and nephew that they wanted to write one, it was beautiful. She's a veterinarian. She's got this beautiful picture with her in her scrubs. I said, it can't, it's discriminatory. You have a nice job. Somebody else might not have a nice job like that. So how can that letter get to that buyer? I can't tell you how to, or the seller, I can't tell you how to legally do it, but you can have your hands in that letter. Okay, so if somebody really wants to think out or into the box, they can actually do that to the seller. But you have to be very careful with these letters because the real estate commission is, they're hot to trot on that. And one last thing that they're really hot to trot on, and this is what's happening in this world because some people are doing what they're supposed to do, some people are not. When you go to your home, your final inspection, and you take the super off or the lockbox off, whichever the key would be in, when should you give that buyer the key?
After closing.
Right on. And if you don't, it's punitive damages. It's a big, I had this discussion with the real estate commission about 2-3 months ago. And they made a big to-do because quite frankly, a lot of realtors 2 or 3 months ago couldn't even come to closing. So how were you supposed to give them the key? Seller's not there. Buyer's there alone with a clerk and the realtors aren't there. So, but you know, you get one bad deal, they shoot it up the flagpole and it made it all the way up to Trenton. And now all of a sudden it's a big deal to give a buyer a key, even though you're all going to closing. You know, you have it all everything's been approved. The monies are in place. They just haven't solidified the closing docs. But if something goes wrong, it's just one more person to throw a dart at. And that's going to be the realtor that gave that person the key ahead of time. Makes sense? It doesn't, but it does. So just hold the key, make sure you give it to them, even if you got to go back and lay it on the mat or do something or walk into the closing envelope. You can give the key. If you're not going to closing, you can give the key to a clerk and say, please distribute the key to the buyer after the closing is conducted. Okay, so that you can do too. So there's just a little bit more communication as there is. The more communication we have with the realtors, the other, people involved with the business. One last thing is 1153, contractual. Okay, how many of us are doing a deal today? Say you do a deal today. What day should you be putting that commitment in play? Pam, this is going to help you, or Pat, this is going to help you out.
I mean, the mortgage commitment?
That's correct. You're doing a deal today and you're doing your own contract. How much time you're going to give your buyer to get that commitment?
I usually give everybody 3 weeks.
probably not enough.
Well, if you're closing in 30 days,
Well, you're not, we didn't say when we're gonna close. We just.
no, that's true.
Yeah.
And if it's a long closing and I have someone come back to me, let's say we were going to close the end of June, and they put in there, they want their commitment date, say June 15th.
Right.
I always go back and fight that, because I don't want my listing sitting there for 6 weeks to find out, or 8 weeks to find out the deal's not going through.
Right. And if we put that up, if we rush and we think that everyone's gonna do us a favor and have a turnaround for, say, we're doing a 30-day closing, and they're gonna do the appraisal in 2 weeks, what are we're setting up a false precedent, right? We're putting ourselves, and if I'm doing the contract or somebody else, I'm asking for that, you want at least a minimum of 3, if not 4 weeks for the commitment. Because if you don't get that commitment on time, what can the seller do?
We can void the contract.
That's correct. That's the worst case scenario. And that's exactly what a lot of them are doing. Because why? In most cases, the house has gone up a little bit. So think about that when we're doing these contracts. And that's one thing about being in the driver's seat when you're doing the contracts, you can move that date out a little bit. So try and give yourself as much time. Be realistic with your time. Even communicate with the vendor or the lender and say, hey, listen, what's your turnaround for your you bring in the A team, B team, C team, whoever you're bringing out to do the appraisal. How much time do I need to get that into, on the street, into the office, through the underwriter, and approved? I mean, and I think that's a valid question. And all of our lenders inside the house that represent us know that we're looking for that kind of commitment. I know, Oak is kind of looking for, they're kind of looking for 4 weeks. Most of them are looking for 4 weeks. It's not a bad number, but when you're trying to do a 4-week, 5-week closing, that number is really, all those days are now on top of each other. So just be concerned about that, because these are contractual items. These are items that kill deals. These are items that give the seller control of not going forward. And here you have, I mean, we just had to have to an agent down in Ocean City. The seller did not let the appraiser in. The appraiser had to come back. And within a 10-week period, that seller got out of that contract. And he purposely kind of didn't let him through. So it's kind of like what we've all learned about it such afterwards. So just be careful with your timelines. Make them realistic. Communicate, call the lenders, call the agents. What is your seller looking for? And I think the more we communicate with each other, the smoother the deal was. I found it built a lot of friendships with other brokers. They don't work for me. They work for other places, and I can call them up. I'm just on the phone with McKenna the other day. We're talking on Saturday. So it's you build relationships. There's no reason to have these fences. Just build relationships, and you will find yourself having smoother transactions. Okay. One last open forum. Any questions at all? Katie, you clear? Good deal. Good deal. Everyone have a nice holiday.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
We had Passover and Easter all in the same week. It's always good. So if there's any questions at all, I mean, please call Jim or myself. Don't get yourself backed into a corner. Let us help you out of it before you get backed in, okay? And I appreciate you all taking the time to take this call today, and I wish you all the best. All right? Have a fantastic day. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Have a nice one.
Bye-bye.
My sister used to work for you guys a long time ago. So